Okay, there we go. I'm not sure exactly what was going on with the sound on the Facebook end of it. I'm not sure at all. We're gonna go ahead and quit using that setting from here on out. Ooh-wee. So I guess here we go for the intro. It's Monday night, and welcome to the Unholy Tea. Welcome, welcome, and welcome. So let's take a moment and talk about this. What exactly are we going to do with the Unholy Tea? What's the Unholy Tea? It's just that, unholy tea. So on last week's episode, I started to try and get into the topic of time bending. Time and time bending were the topics I was trying to hit last week, and didn't really get to start getting into some meat and bones of things. So we just gonna go ahead and start this out. I'm gonna go ahead throw a screen share up here. We got the audio routed in, so those of you listening on the radio, y'all can hear. But we're just gonna go ahead and jump right back into this conversation from last week. So let's go ahead and get this rocking.
What is time? In this channel, we've talked a lot about time. As black holes warp space around them, we've learned that time slows down. We've discovered the time-influencing effects of gravity and even how the James Webb Telescope can peer through time to the distant past by taking advantage of the fixed speed of light. All this makes sense so far, but what actually is time? You can't taste it, touch it, or feel it, yet time has an unstoppable influence on us and is pushing us forward whether we like it or not. Doesn't something that impacts everything we do deserve some additional understanding? I'm Alex McColgan, and you're watching Astrum. And while this is an area that scientists have many theories about, I'd like to share with you today one model that might help you understand this mysterious concept that is ticking all around us. By the end of this video, we are going to have a possible explanation for why time slows down as velocity increases, and why shapes warp when undergoing velocities close to the speed of light. This video is a collaboration with my...
Now, before we get any further, I'm gonna go ahead and skip ahead a little bit and make a general disclaimer. We're not gonna say that this is 100% correct, but just hear it out. Hear it out.
To begin with one foundational idea. Time is actually another dimension. Now, before you double check that you haven't logged into some sci-fi channel by mistake, let's discuss what I mean by dimensions. While in popular culture, different dimensions are often described as parallel worlds that are very similar to ours, yet subtly different. In this context, when we talk of different dimensions, we are referring to the dimensions of space, as in three-dimensional space, or 3D space, which may be far more familiar to you. This is by no means trivial though. 3D space is all around you. It is the around you, and is very relevant to our topic. Let's begin by making sure we understand the 3Ds, and the relationships between them before we add the fourth D. Broadly speaking, 3D or three-dimensional space simply refers to space that can be measured in 3 different perpendicular directions. The perpendicular nature of these dimensions is important, but we'll get to that later. 3-dimensional space is usually described as having height, width, and depth, and they all have 90-degree angles between them. Simply put, objects like us that exist in 3D space can move left and right, up and down, and forwards and backwards. We are comfortable with this kind of space. Using this as our basis, it becomes much easier to imagine what we mean by 2D space and even 1D space. To move from one space to another, all we need to do is remove or add an extra dimension of measurement or movement that must be a 90-degree angle from all previously existing angles. So, 2D objects move in a plane that's bounded by the X and Y directions, or the X and Z directions, or the Y and Z directions, but not all 3 at once. 1D objects can only move either along X or Y or Z. Imagine a person who lived in such a 1D world. Their whole existence would be found either moving one way or the other. All of reality would exist either to the left or to the right of them, and would appear as a singular dot. They could not move or see in any of the other directions, and probably could not even comprehend such directions as even existing. Photons whizzing by them would only be visible if they entered the singular line that was a 1D person's whole area of existence. Now, adding extra directions of movement is what's needed to move things up from 1D to 2D to 3D. So, in theory, we can predict what we need to do if we were to jump to 4D. However, here we hit a snag. While it's easy to draw a line that's perfectly perpendicular to a single other line, or to draw another line on top of those lines that is perpendicular to the 2 previous lines, how would we draw a 4th line that's perpendicular to all 3?
Lee Houston, blessed is he who studies and shows himself approved. The moment we think we know all we need to know, the moment is the moment we should acknowledge how very little we know. Very true words. Now, as we go further, I want us to really take a moment and let it sink in that we are looking to explain dimensions outside of the range of our perceptions. Let's continue.
3. Surely such a thing is impossible. Well, within 3D space, such a thing is impossible. The best we can do is draw approximations. For instance, it's possible to draw an approximation of a 3D shape on 2D paper by doing something like this. These lines are all 2-dimensional, but we look at this and our brain recognizes that this is a picture of a 3D shape. So, in the same way, we could probably do something similar to what a 4D object might look like using just 3D lines. Mathematicians have attempted to do this, although their results tend to be a little confusing. Although this is mathematically sound as a basis for a 4D object, I personally don't find my understanding of 4D space deepened by looking at it, so I won't focus on it in this video. There is some evidence, however, that a 4th direction exists, and we are moving along it right now. That 4th direction, or dimension, is time. Einstein predicted this connection when he linked space and time into one unified space-time in his theories of relativity. According to him, time and space are 2 parts of the same thing. To me, this connects with 4D space very nicely. Just as there is no real difference between the Z and the X or Y directions, so too would there not be any difference between time and space if time is just another direction, albeit one that we can't see. And time is important. Without time, our 3D space wouldn't move. It would perpetually be in one state, because it's time that allows us to move about in it. But why can't we see it? Why can't we look in the direction of time? To explain this, let's look at the difference between the different dimensional spaces. We best notice this when we consider what 2D objects might look like if they were to move around in 3D space. This is where we start to delve into the model. Let's begin by visualizing a standard 3D space. But because we want to eventually see all of space and time in one model, let's cheat a little. Let's compress all of 3D reality as we know it into a flat, 2-dimensional place. In this plane, Let's make that our XY plane, which we will label space, which frees up the Z dimension for time. In this model, all 3D people are now just 2D. A 2D person could exist and live their lives in the place marked space at the bottom of our chart. However, by moving them up on the chart at a constant rate, they are also moving through time. Let's for ease and convenience say that the top of our diagram is the future, while the bottom is the past. So the higher up our 2D person goes in this diagram, the older they get. As we don't seem to have a whole lot of control over our ability to travel through time, let's imagine for a second that our 2D person travels upwards at a constant rate, as if there is some consistent force or wind at play pushing them upwards towards the future. Sadly, we cannot slow down time for ourselves simply through willpower, no matter how much we might want to do so. However, it is misleading to say that we can't change it at all. The faster we travel in space, the slower we travel in time. This is one of the guiding principles of Einstein's relativity. This model can express this idea through the power of vectors. As our 2D person tries to move to their left or to their right, their
Now, right here, I want to jump in. I want to jump in and hit this with a pause. So, as we're listening to this next part of it, from the way that was worded, it would be logical to assume that speed is a key. But what if it's actually the slowing down of speed? As we're listening to this example, I want to plant a seed in our heads real quick. I want us to imagine that the more we can condense the energy, the more that we can center ourselves in a specific moment, a specific point in time and space. Let's take that as the way to open the portal. With that thought process in mind, let's continue with this information.
vector of travel changes. While traveling at a fixed rate, like a sail on a ship catching a breeze, we can only go as fast as the wind takes us, so the vector coming out from their front must always remain the same. To travel the fastest through time, our 2D person must orient his vector completely in the future direction or upwards. However, if they are to travel any amount in either direction to their sides, they can only do so by pointing their vector away from their direction of travel. They have motion in the X direction now, but they have done so by reducing their motion in the Z direction. They are moving through space, but at the cost of moving a little slower through time. Taking this to its furthest extreme, our individual has completely flipped on their side and now only has motion in the direction of X and none in the direction of Z. They have velocity in space, but not time. So I suppose this implies our vector is the speed of causality, or the speed of light. If this is the speed we're talking about, then moving at low speeds through space would not have any noticeable difference in our speed through time. We'd have to go really fast before we started.
All right, so we're done with that video. But let's expand on that a little bit. Let's take that thought process and that up and down vector that they gave for time, right? Let's think about all these self-help charts with emotions and how they give the energetic level of each emotion. Let's substitute that chart for the concept of time in that video, and let's expand on our awareness. Now, I use terms like time bending, and I've been asked, what do you mean by time bending? Well, how about I give you a video from this lady that gives some hacks on mind bending. Let's go.
Our relationship with time. Time bending is not something that is some sort of gift that some people have and others don't. Time bending is a very specific set of skills that anyone can access and utilize in order to manifest their wildest dreams and have what they desire come into their life even faster than they expect. And if you're living a life where you think, well, my manifestations aren't showing up fast. In fact, some of them haven't even shown up, but I'm doing the work. Chances are you just haven't mastered time yet. Time is really a construct that we've created as humans, and we're going to talk about more of this construct later today, that we've created to actually assist us in processing our own consciousness. So if our consciousness creates time, then surely we're able to also bend it and play with it and move it around and recreate it a little bit. And if we're able to do this, surely we're able to allow some of our manifestations to come in even faster. So how do we do this? You want to work at expanding your perception of time. And you do that by getting clear on your current perception of time and space. So if we also look at the time-space continuum, time and space are interconnected. And as we understand this more and more and more, we're able to also realize that when we create more space in our life, we're able to actually alter our perception of time. When we create more space within our consciousness, we're able to create more space to actually hold our manifestations, right? So one of the things you can do to start playing with this is to consciously expand your awareness of time and of space. Because the more that you alter your perception of space, you're going to then set yourself up in consciousness to start altering your perception of time. So the next layer to this is I invite all of you to keep a time perception journal. This is one of the things as well that I started doing. I mean, I've done all of these, but this really, really, really helped, where I would basically keep a journal and I would simply write down every single day something that I noticed about the time in my day with no judgment, with not trying to be a time bender immediately, just being aware. So this journal will help you literally be more aware of your own perception till you get.
So, Lee, I see you got a question. How can you have legitimate deja vu or legitimate prediction unless time is one of the dimensions that are intertwined with us? All right, so let's shift our perception to say that we exist within this construct of time, this system of measurement. Let's step this up a bit and let's apply the double slit experiment and the results of that to time. Past, present, future, they're all different moments that all exist simultaneously. Let's say that the energetic focus, the energetic patterning determines what realm we exist within. If you boil this all down to energy, some pathways start to open up. I hope that gave you a little bit of an answer. Let's get back to this time bending.
To a point where you're writing a lot of things down in here and you're celebrating and you're like, you know what, this happened today. It seems magical. It seems unexplainable. But it's not weird or unexplainable because you're consciously working on these tools. So the next layer to this is what I call slow motion training. This is where you train your own consciousness to start intentionally blurring the speed of a frame of reality, okay? The more you train yourself, slow motion, speed it up, slow motion, speed it up, the more your consciousness is going to get into this heightened awareness of knowing that it can bend and shift these frames. One of the other things I love to do, go for a multi-dimensional nature walk. Go for a walk in nature. Even if you've been there like a lot before, go for a walk. But what I want you to do whilst you're walking is I want you to just notice what you notice and then expand your awareness. Allow yourself to notice the minute details. Bending time is not done just with your mind. We use the mind in order to tap into these pieces, but you've got to be connected to your multidimensional senses. And the more you practice this and the more you do it, the more you get comfortable with it, the more you open.
Now, let me take a moment and interrupt this real quick. I get it. When I first used to look videos like this up, I would think to myself, like, this sounds crazy. But the more I watched videos like this and soaked that information in and started applying them in a different manner, the more mind-blowing observations I would have. I'll give you an example. As we listen to these tools, use them in your social interactions. You constantly at war with somebody, you constantly having difficult dealings with a person, take these tools, these principles, and apply them to yourself and monitoring yourself and watch the results you get. Let's get back to this.
To the infinite possibilities around this, it's like a muscle, right? You go deeper and deeper and deeper with it, and this will help you as well bring in what you're feeling from your future because you're more tapped into those feelings. For the second layer, you get to look at your relationship with time and go deep into actually understanding what is your current relationship with time. If you're not sure, then just look at your current reality. You get to craft it. You get to choose it. You get to define it. You get to look at it. You get to play with it. And guys, it gets to be fun. So in order to shift this, in order to redefine this, we need to go through some of the constructs around this and some of the elements to help you unpack it a little more. So we've touched on this. Time is a human construct, right? In quantum physics, scientists literally discovered that particles can exist in multiple locations at once, simultaneously. Hang on, aren't we made up of particles? Last time I checked. Hang on, isn't our consciousness made up of particles? Which wouldn't it mean that really particles through our own consciousness is observing the time? Oh, maybe we can shift and play with this a little deeper. What if our consciousness could be in two or more places at once? What if we were able to tap into two or more manifestations at once, a beginning manifestation and an end point, in order to fold the time and just receive the greater manifestation now? Again, quantum physics shows us that time can pass at different rates depending on the relative motion between the observer. Now, there's a very similar connection when it comes to our life, when it comes to manifestations, when it comes to our emotions and our experiences. And this can also alter time and our perception of time. So what most people don't know is that you can be constantly playing with time, stretching it out, using altered states of consciousness in order to shift your perception and reality of time. We know the particles can be in two or more places at once. What if we were able to perceive reality in two or more places at once? So I never just focus on the one goal. I always focus on the goal, and then for those of you who have done the quest, the vision beyond the vision, but I do it at the same time. So when you start opening your consciousness in this way, it's important to go into the time expansion internal rewire. This is where you really get to recraft your relationship with time. And this is an invitation for you to use this as a tool every day, ideally, where you sit down and you journal and you define your relationship with time. How does it get to look like? This might look something like, I am a powerful time bender. I love time. Time is one of my greatest assets. I have now mastered time. I love playing with time and bending time and space in order for my manifestations to come in faster. I always have enough time for the things that I love every single day. I always have time left over. I always have extra time that I don't know what to do with because I just live in an abundance of time. So we're up to the third step. This is where you use your own frequency to specifically alter the experience you're having with time. We are made up of light, we're made up of frequency, we're made up of vibration, and you are in control of your vibrational state. At any given moment, you can change your state. Here's what most people do. They think time is linear, and they think that because something happened in their past, then that's what's going to happen in their future. So unconsciously, they take the elements in their past and they literally copy paste it into their future. Oh, I'm not good at that, so I'll never be good at that. I lost money in my business before, so that's just who I am. And we copy paste, we copy paste, we copy paste. Stop it. At any moment, you can zoom back and be like, okay, the past is the past. And actually, I can alter that if I needed to or chose to. But just for now, the past is the past. And at any moment and now, you have an opportunity to completely shift and recreate your future. So one of the ways to do this is to tap into your multidimensional awareness and your senses that we talked about. So I talked about going for the multidimensional nature walk. A layer deeper to this is when you go into a space, and again, nature is like super great for this, but I want you to also notice everything you were doing in your multidimensional senses. Notice the expanded smell, touch, feeling, what you're seeing, everything. But I want you to practice zooming in and zooming out this time. I want you to literally like see the leaf in front of you, but then like zoom into the leaf. You want to practice having your consciousness notice the details. And then I want you to zoom out. If you're sitting there in this location, can you zoom out like this girl sitting on this rock by the riverbed? Can you zoom out and even notice yourself sitting on the rock? The more you're able to jump in and out of time, the more you start becoming lucid with this. And the more you start noticing how to zoom in and out of your own frequency. The more you start noticing, well, when I sit in nature with this vibe, this is what happens around me. And the more I change my vibe and have a different state, this is what happens around me. So intention plus frequency equals a time shift. If you have an intention to manifest something and you're able to alter your frequency, you're able to shift the time. If you have an intention to time bend your reality and you can alter your frequency, you can shift the time. So what if you were to hold an intention to bend time and then run a specific frequency, a specific feeling, if you like, through your system that you're an incredible time bender? This is completely possible. You are in control of your vibrational state. You can run frequencies through your system and you can change your state at any given time. So I recommend you start with this and just start at any point, closing your eyes and just feeling the feeling of, I'm an amazing time bender. It's one of my skills. It's in my toolkit. I play time. I bend with it. It's malleable. I love it. And just feel what that feels like. And whenever you get the feeling of like, yeah, I love time, double it. Let it rush through every single cell of your being and then triple it and let it vibrate in every single cell. And in the beginning, maybe you can't feel much. Maybe it's hard. Maybe you do it for a week and you're like, it's not working. I can't feel the frequency. Keep going. And you will get it. You will get it. It's like going to the gym and working out a muscle. It will get stronger and stronger and it will become easier and easier. And once you have that base layer frequency activated, you can start playing with what I call time compression. This is where we literally compress the time of something we desire to take a certain amount of time in order to shift and alter the time. So you can practice this and you can do this in your day-to-day life. And you do this by practicing a specific task, and you literally visualize yourself playing with this task and getting it done in a shorter period than what you think it would take, right? So a practical example is just saying, okay, it's probably going to take me an hour to finish off all these emails, but you drop in and you imagine the emails being complete, and you imagine, okay, that's roughly what it looks like in my consciousness for an hour of time, and you just start compressing it. Just start bending it in. You start moving the pieces within your own consciousness, which alters your perception. And maybe the first time it takes you an hour, and then maybe you do it again, maybe it takes you 40 minutes. Maybe all of a sudden you notice you're having some rapid shifts with time. And then the last piece is to embody this, guys, is to be this. Be a time bender. This is an invitation for all of you right now. Be the time bender, guys. It's a choice. And the more you embody this and embrace this and shift your identity to align with this, the more fun you're going to have and the more you get to play with it. I said this so many times in the quest, manifestation is a lifestyle. It's a state of being. Time bending is a state of being. Time bending is something that you get to play with. Time bending is something that you can learn and you can practice and you can play with. Time bending is about remembering that time is simultaneous and we are multidimensional beings having a multidimensional experience. And the only trap we fall in is when we lose sight of that, is when we forget. Time bending is about remembering that either time is altering you or you are altering time. So you get to choose.
So Lee, you can find your frequency. You just have to listen to the signs. You have to listen to the signs that tell you you found it. Nobody can tell you the signs. You have to listen for the signs. And let's go ahead and find
again and again and again. You see, there's two different ways to manifest anything that you're dreaming about, anything that you're looking to call into this reality. And the first one is called manufactured manifestation. And this is what we're taught in school each and every single day in, day out. Set a goal. Now figure out how you're going to do it. How's that going to happen? What do you need to do in order to make that possible? And then utilizing this construct which has been placed upon us, we start going, well, we must create our whole lives like that. I want this job opportunity. I want this relationship. I want this body. How do I make it happen? How do I make it happen? How do I make it happen? And that's the one question that's really screwing it all up for you right now. You see, you don't make anything happen. In fact, if you look back at all the different manifestations and all the layers and everything which you have and haven't called into your reality, do you really think you controlled any of that? Do you really think that right now I manifested this moment because of this jungle and all these trees around me? You really think I made the trees grow? You really think that I managed to tap in and create this perfect experience in the moment? You see, yes, we're the creators of our own destiny, but what we don't realize is that the destiny is coming through us. The destiny, the dream, the vision, the soul's desires. It's looking to come through you, but in order to do that, you can't control the process. You've got to get out of the way. So if we're not manufacturing the process, what are we doing? We're choosing to surrender. We're choosing to surrender to the process. We're choosing to get out of the way and instead trust in the divine timing, trust in the divine synchronicities, trust in the fact that we're fully guided, fully supported in this entire process. You see, if you have a yearning, a soul's desire, something that you're looking to call into your reality, something that you're looking to manifest, a dream, then instead of asking, how do I do that? Why don't you start asking, how can I simply show up in order to speed up this manifestation process? Because you see, it's already done. If your soul is pulling at you, if you feel a call, if you feel a desire, if you know that there's something greater pulling literally at your heartstrings right now, then it's not up to you to make it happen. It's up to you to get out of the way. It's up to you to open up and surrender to the divine energy that is looking to come through you into this physical manifestation. It's up to you to grasp and truly embody these manifestations through into the physical. It is not your job to make them happen. It is not your job to make them happen. And I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that you just sit there and you go and now lie on the couch and go, you know what? Well, Regan said that the manifestations are just going to show up and it's not my responsibility and I don't have to do anything. No, you must participate in the manifestation process. You must participate in your own rescue. You must participate in your own greatness. But from a place of surrender, not a place of control. See, when we're controlling it and we're saying, well, I want this to happen, but it's got to happen this way by joining these dots, by doing this thing, because that person's got to say this to that person, and then this has got to unfold this way. The minute we start doing that, the minute we start implanting those patterns of behavior, those certain frequencies, what do? We shut down the field of endless possibilities. We control it. We say it's got to happen like this. And then when a divine synchronicity comes in, guess what? You can't see it. You're not available to it. You can't even recognize the opportunity, the person, the money, the relationship that's been put in front of you, right in front of your face. You can't even see it because you're so stuck in your own map, in your own thought construct of going, you know what? It's got to happen this way. So what if you got out of the way? What if you instead said each and every single day, I am intentional. I know where I'm going. I know what I'm calling in. I know what I'm manifesting, and from this place, I open to receiving that. From this place, I choose to truly surrender. From this place, please support me. Please guide me. Please show me. How can I better show up in this manifestation process? What can I do today, right now, in order to facilitate the process of manifestation? What can I do in order to pull this manifestation into the now, to truly embody it, to be the vessel that brings it here on planet Earth, right here, right now? How can I be of service? How can I get out of the way, moving past my constructs of limitation, my fear, my negative self-doubt, my limiting beliefs, anything which is stopping or blocking the flow of manifestation? How can I get rid of the manufactured constructs of let me control the process because it has to happen like this. How can I get rid of all of that? And instead say yes. And instead be open. And instead be available. And instead leaning back into your soul's desires, into your manifestations that, by the way, are already done across different times, different realities, different dimensions. They've already happened. If they hadn't have happened, you wouldn't be able to feel them right now. Knowing that we're multifaceted, we're able to tap into this different version of ourselves, which is already living into the reality that we dream of, that we feel. And from that place, we choose to say yes. From that place, we choose to be of service to the vision. From that place, we choose to surrender. I choose to surrender. I choose to surrender. I choose to surrender. Say it with me. I choose to surrender. It is done. It is done. It is done.
Go to the next one queued up and get this rolling. Y'all ready?
What happens when we die? Does all experience end forever? Or do we live on somehow? Well over half of all humanity believes that death is not the true end of life, and that beyond this mysterious threshold, something continues on. The standard view among secular academics is that these beliefs are no more than wishful thinking, a product of our fear of death and our inability to comprehend the ultimate end of experience. I too struggle to imagine how this vast universe could be organized in a way that preserves all minds at the point of death, presumably for eternity. Personally, I'm not religious, but nevertheless, I don't believe we can simply dismiss the possibility of survival. Despite the many discoveries of modern science, reality remains a deeply mysterious place. There are, for example, respected philosophers and thinkers who believe that there is a not insignificant possibility that our entire reality is a simulation created by an advanced civilization with goals beyond our comprehension. It goes without saying that if we do live in a simulation, all bets are off about what we can expect to experience at death. Many believe that reports like those of near-death experiences, NDEs, and apparent reincarnation offer possible evidence of survival. In the world of the paranormal, we find reports of strange phenomena that resist ordinary explanation, and I've read various cases that strike me as deeply anomalous. I actually studied psychology at one of the few universities in the world with a parapsychology department, the University of Northampton in the UK. And reading about some of these strange cases was on my undergraduate syllabus. While ultimately I'm not convinced by these cases, I don't reject the possibility of life after death. In fact, I'm convinced that it's real. In the end, it was not strange paranormal phenomena that eventually convinced me that consciousness does survive death. Instead, it was a philosophical argument that I encountered much later as a postgraduate in philosophy. This argument, as we will explore today, appears to demonstrate that consciousness is immortal, that death as a real end to conscious experience is an epistemic illusion, and that following death we should expect not oblivion, but an enduring sense of always having existed, albeit manifest in the form of other conscious beings. This argument, which comes from the philosopher Thomas Clarke, might be seen as a form of impersonal reincarnation, and it is, I think, the very least we should expect to experience after death. In spite of this seemingly bold claim, it is a view that does not rely, as it might at first seem, on some exotic view of consciousness. This argument, as we will explore, would hold true even if we live in an entirely physical universe, governed by completely unconscious, directionless physical laws. To be clear, My own view is that consciousness may well be more fundamental than current materialist science has appreciated. But I find it fascinating that a view that makes no such claim offers the most profound argument for survival that I have heard. It is this argument, together with its extraordinary implications, that we will explore today. As I mentioned, this argument originates with the philosopher Thomas Clarke, and it can be found in his essay titled Death, Nothingness and Subjectivity. Clarke begins his essay by pointing out a surprisingly common error made by secular and scientific thinkers, that if death is the end of experience, then the dying individual should anticipate being cast into an oblivion of nothingness at death. Clarke lists many secular thinkers who replace religious notions of heaven and hell with the concept of nothingness. Clarke points out that many secularists have mistakenly depicted death as though it were a kind of positive nothing, an eternal situation into which the experiencing subject is plunged as though into a dark ocean at the moment of death. The error, as Clarke points out, quote, is to reify nothingness, make it a positive condition or quality, for example of blackness, and then place the individual in it after death, so that we somehow fall into nothingness to remain there eternally. End quote. Clarke is far from the first to point out this logical fallacy. Over 2 millennia ago, the Greek philosopher Epicurus wrote, quote, "Death is nothing to us. When we exist, death is not, and when death exists, we are not." End quote. Clarke argues that when we dispense with this flawed idea that a kind of positive nothing awaits us at death, a strange and counterintuitive picture emerges, a new conception of immortality. Immortal consciousness. We're almost ready to dive into Clarke's profound argument for the immortality of consciousness, but before we do, we first need to understand a fundamental truth about conscious beings. Clarke calls this truth personal subjective continuity. It refers to the fact that, as conscious beings, we experience our entire lives as one uninterrupted sequence of experience. While there are many times in life when we are unconscious, such as during dreamless sleep or while under general anesthetic, these unconscious moments simply do not exist for us. This creates our personal subjective continuity, in which subjectivity bridges all gaps and our entire lives exist to us as one continuous stream of awareness. As Clarke observes, it is our nature as conscious beings that we always exist to ourselves. This block of experience is bracketed at its beginning and end by our birth and our death. Yet just as we have no memory of the billions of years prior to our birth, nor should we expect to be plunged into an eternal night after death. Instead, Clarke argues that death will not be the end of experience. To understand why, we'll now explore a thought experiment which I've adapted from the one in Clarke's essay. Imagine a world where cutting-edge medical technology allows people to undergo a remarkable process known as life pause. During life pause, an individual's consciousness is temporarily halted, and advanced surgeries akin to intricate brain and body makeovers take place. This technology enables not only the suspension of time, but also the customization of memories, personality traits, and even physical appearance. Now meet our protagonist, Alex. Disillusioned about his life, Alex decides to undergo life pause for an extended period. He also signs over permission to the life pause technicians to make any changes they want to his mind and body. Before the procedure, Alex is Alex Classic. After the transformation, however, there are two possible outcomes. The first we'll call Alex 2.0. In this scenario, the changes made during life pause are moderate. Alex 2.0 wakes up with a refined version of the original characteristics. perhaps a slightly altered personality or some new preferences. Alex 2.0, for example, finds that he now enjoys coffee, where Alex Classic had not. From the point of view of Alex 2.0, the transformation feels like a seamless continuation of the same conscious journey through life. We now move on to the second scenario. This time, the life pause procedure creates Alex Reborn. Here, life pause introduces much more radical alterations. Alex Reborn wakes up with significant changes, perhaps a completely different personality, different memories, and even a different physical appearance. Yet despite these stark differences, the subjective experience remains unbroken. From Alex Classic to Alex Reborn, there is no perceived gap or interruption in consciousness. Alex Reborn is significantly different to Alex Classic, and yet it nonetheless feels to him as though he has always existed. Whether Alex emerges as a refined version, as in Alex 2.0, or a radically different persona, as in Alex Reborn, the key insight is that subjectively, the thread of awareness persists. We now move on to the final part of the thought experiment. Now imagine that instead of undergoing life pause, Alex is involved in a fatal car accident on his way to the life pause clinic, resulting in his irreversible natural death. Now imagine that later, a new consciousness emerges in the universe, free from any direct causal link to Alex. Nevertheless, we will call this new consciousness Alex Renewed. It is here that we realize the surprising truth. There is no difference between that which is taking place in the life pause procedure and the subjective continuity between these distant conscious beings. Just as with life pause, the transition from Alex Classic to Alex Renewed does not entail a subjective gap. There is no experiential void, no first-hand encounter with nothingness. Instead, just as in the other scenarios, there is a seamless transition from one subjective state to another, even if memories, personality, and physicality vastly differ. We simply always are this generic subjectivity wherever and whenever it arises in the universe. When we really see that every Alex is the same identity, the implications are profound. Alex is everyone in every scenario. Alex is you. The key insight is that death and birth can be seen as identical to that which is occurring in the life pause scenario. And indeed, it is the same as that which is occurring between every conscious moment of our lives. As Clarke writes, quote, "Even if all centers of awareness were extinguished and the next conscious creature appeared millions of years hence, perhaps in a galaxy far, far away, there would still be no subjective interregnum. Subjectivity would jump that objective gap just as easily as it jumps the gap from our last experience before sleep to the first upon awakening. All the boring eons that pass without the existence of a subject will be irrelevant for the subject that comes into being, nor will they count as nothingness for all the conscious entities which ceased to exist. Subjectivity, awareness, consciousness, experience, whatever we call it, never stops arising as far as it is concerned." End quote. The thought experiment shows that what we really are, our true enduring identity, is consciousness itself, or what Clarke calls generic subjectivity. We should clarify that this is quite different to the traditional idea of reincarnation, in which your specific consciousness will, after death, suddenly discover itself inhabiting some new being. Instead, the continuum of consciousness transcends individual identity. It is more accurate to say that you continue as consciousness itself. And while this may sound like a familiar platitude, the thought experiment shows just how intimately we share in the subjective identity with all conscious beings. Reflecting on Clarke's argument, the neuroscientist Sam Harris remarks, quote, "The birth of any conscious being after your death is in some sense deeply analogous to your own rebirth. Given your identity as consciousness, your survival of death is more or less assured as long as consciousness persists anywhere." End quote. Both Clarke and Harris offer this idea of a continued consciousness beyond death as offering some comfort to those who fear the end of life. And yet others might see that such a view brings the varied conscious experiences on offer in reality far too close for comfort. Consider all of the conscious experiences taking place in the natural world, both beautiful and terrifying, or of alien forms of mind that might emerge in the future or in distant reaches of the cosmos. As consciousness, ours is the experience of the greatest and most serene enlightenment, as well as all of those actual experiences that exist and will exist of terrible suffering, loss, and frustrated desires. Several philosophers have argued that our primary identity is consciousness, and that this fact carries profound ethical implications. In his fascinating book, You Are Them, the philosopher Magnus Finding challenges his readers, asking, quote, "Why are you the same person when you wake up in the morning as the you who went to sleep the night before? Why don't you instead wake up as a scared rabbit in a dark forest in the middle of the night? Well, who says that you don't?" End quote. It's a view that resonates with both ancient and contemporary ideas. One in particular is open individualism, put forward by the contemporary philosopher Daniel Kolak. In open individualism, there exists only one numerically identical subject who is everyone at all times. In open individualism, there isn't a distinct entity that is the owner of first-person experiences. Instead, wherever there is awareness, there is you. Every conscious being that has ever existed or will exist in the future is experienced by the same principle of awareness. By analogy, we can think of this awareness principle as similar to the process of nuclear fusion taking place in stars. There are trillions of stars in the universe, and they are all powered by nuclear fusion. But we don't say that there are billions of nuclear fusions. Rather, it is more accurate to say that there is just one process of nuclear fusion, which powers all stars in existence. Similarly, there is just one principle of awareness that underlies the innumerable minds in existence. In this view, there is no separate self or soul navigating through experiences. There is only consciousness experiencing itself in an innumerable variety of forms. Whether or not we live in a purely physical universe, consciousness, by its nature, transcends individuality and binds us in a shared continuous experience of existence. The New Age slogan, "We are all one," is often accompanied with naive platitudes of peace and love. In truth, facing the unfettered reality of consciousness as our primary identity is deeply sobering. We see that there is, in truth, no escape for conscious beings, regardless of their circumstances. We are, for all time, and to the last conscious being, in this together. In this sense, the recognition that our ultimate identity is consciousness is more than a salve for the fear of death. It is, and there is ultimately nothing for us to do other than to try to improve the available experiences of all conscious beings within the reach of our influence. I and others have argued that this will require the systematic reduction, wherever possible, of all avoidable states of agony and suffering. Another, perhaps secondary imperative is the general facilitation of conscious states which all beings might consider to be worth having, such as happiness, joy, and bliss. The emerging view profoundly challenges many of our human norms and practices. For example, it negates all rationale for retributive punishment, or what we might call violence to consciousness. Speciesism, outgroup aggression, and selfish prejudice are seen for what they are, a product of mistaken identity.
Alrighty, so we've hit the end of that video, and we've almost hit the end of this week's Unholy Tea. Lee, yes and no. We're going to get to this. Remember, these are build sessions, so each session we're going to build upon this comprehension. But without further ado on that, I'm going to go ahead and cue up some outro music. Bob Sanchez, you're our sponsor. It's been wonderful. If you're in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, go check out Bob Sanchez. This has been another episode of the Unholy Tea. Y'all know where to find it. Same place, same time. Right here on CSHR Radio. Feels kind of cool. Some outro.